Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving into a massive, truly unprecedented border crisis that unfolded recently, but we're going to look at it through a very specific lens. We're focusing on the incredible and honestly terrifying power of a fabricated story. Today is all about narrative. We're going to see how the weaponization of digital media, a literal campaign of online disinformation, managed to physically mobilize tens of thousands of people across international borders. It's a wild story, so let's get right into it. Section 1. The Ceuta border chaos. An unprecedented surge. Okay, so we really need to understand the staggering physical reality of what went down at the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. Now, Ceuta sits right on the northern coast of Africa, sharing a border with Morocco. Within a single 24-hour period, an estimated 60,000 to 70,000 people surged across both the land and water borders. To put that into perspective for a second, that sudden influx equals nearly 70% of Ceuta's entire normal population. Just imagine your own city nearly doubling in size, literally overnight. The pressure on their local resources was instantaneous and totally overwhelming. But the most crucial takeaway here isn't just the sheer size of the crowd. It's the tragic human toll that this massive surge created. People were taking incredibly dangerous risks to cross. Initially, reports came out saying 34 people had died, but updated figures later confirmed that at least 72 people tragically lost their lives, many of them drowning or getting crushed at a breakwater barrier during the absolute chaos of the crossing. The reality on the ground was nothing short of a severe, immediate humanitarian emergency. With up to 70,000 people flooding in all at once, Spain had to immediately deploy their military just to back up local security forces. You had thousands of people, including highly vulnerable unaccompanied kids, left sleeping in public parks and just out on the streets. And on the other side of the border, Moroccan forces were scrambling to manage the crowds, eventually resorting to using tear gas just to disperse the masses. It was, for all intents and purposes, a complete breakdown of order. Now, as all of this chaotic event was unfolding, the data was fluctuating wildly. Like I mentioned, initial reports claimed 60,000 crossings and 34 deaths, but those numbers quickly jumped to up to 70,000 crossings and at least 72 deaths. Tracking a crisis that is moving at the literal speed of the internet, it's incredibly difficult. By Friday evening, Spanish officials stated that most migrants had voluntarily returned to Morocco, but the shockwaves were really just beginning. Which begs the question, how on earth did tens of thousands of people coordinate this all at exactly the same time? Section 2. Anatomy of a false narrative. The weaponization of social media. Well, the shocking truth is that this entire physical crisis was built on a digital lie. Thousands of young people, mostly on platforms like Instagram and Facebook, were being fed a highly specific narrative. The message was simple. Borders are open. Easily get documents, go to school, and work. It was a complete fabrication. Essentially, it was a beautifully packaged digital mirage designed specifically to manipulate the hopes of vulnerable people and compel them to pack up and move. And make no mistake, there was a highly organized machinery behind this story. This wasn't just some spontaneous rumor that got out of hand. Analysts actually traced the disinformation campaign back to early July, originating from accounts in places like France and Tunisia. It deliberately generated a staggering 11 million impressions. And the craziest part? It didn't just sell them a dream, it provided actual, step-by-step logistical tips on how to execute the border search. This was an engineered narrative designed for maximum disruption. To make the lie even more convincing, they wrapped it in a half-truth. Smuggling networks in these online campaigns seized upon a recent Spanish Supreme Court ruling. The actual ruling limited the immediate returns of migrants arriving by sea, but they completely twisted this legal nuance to falsely promise that anyone who swam to Ceuta had a guaranteed chance at asylum and legally couldn't be turned back. They weaponized legal confusion to pour gasoline on the fire. But here's the thing. A false narrative, no matter how brilliantly crafted, only really works if the audience is desperate enough for a way out. Section 3. The underlying economic drivers. The reality on the ground. To really understand why this specific narrative took root so effectively, we have to look at the environment it was planted in. First, Morocco already acts as a sort of waiting room for tens of thousands of sub-Saharan Africans hoping to somehow reach Europe. Second, and this is crucial, there is intense economic exhaustion and really high youth unemployment among native Moroccans themselves.
Finally, this whole thing sparked right during the Throne Day national holiday, which is a time when Moroccan leadership was actually gathered in that very same northern coastal area. So the tinder was perfectly dry, right? The internet rumor was simply the match.
And Ceuta became the absolute bullseye for this narrative purely because of its geography. It represents a direct physical entry point into the European Union, right there on the African coast. For people entirely exhausted by economic hardship, it's merely a 5-kilometer swim to what they were promised was a guarantee of better jobs and European living conditions. A short, albeit dangerous swim for a promised new life. So how did the international community react to a sovereign border being suddenly overrun by an internet rumor?
Section 4. The geopolitical fallout. The political blame game.
As you might expect, the reaction was swift and fiercely divided. On one side, you have Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez writing directly to the EU. He condemned the surge as unlawful, called it a violation of Spain's territorial integrity, and squarely blamed human trafficking mafias for orchestrating the whole thing. On the other side, Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni took a very hardline stance. She actually warned that Italy might take the extraordinary step of suspending the Schengen agreement with Spain entirely if the pressure continued, demanding stronger controls and much faster deportations. Think about that. A digital rumor was now threatening foundational European treaties.
Meanwhile, the rumor mill certainly didn't stop at the border. It escalated into high-level international accusations. You had some Spanish politicians floating wild theories, accusing Morocco of actively working with the US and Israel to, quote-unquote, blackmail Spain, linking the entire surge to Morocco's 2020 normalization of relations with Israel. In response to that, Israel's UN ambassador, Dan Danon, fired back, criticizing Spain for lecturing Israel, while Spain still maintains what he called colonial enclaves in Africa. What started as an Instagram lie morphed into full-blown, heated geopolitical theater at the United Nations. But let's step away from the geopolitical blame game and international treaties for a second and look at the actual individual impact.
Section 5. The real human cost. A deceived generation.
Because at the heart of this explainer, underneath all the data and the politics, is a very human story. Take a 13-year-old Moroccan boy named Siraj, who actually ran away from home to join the surge in Ceuta. He wasn't driven by complex geopolitical motives or grand strategies. He went based purely on those viral Instagram and Facebook videos, the ones that promised him an easy life, school, and legal documents. Thankfully, his family eventually located and retreated him. But Siraj is really the face of a generation that is being completely deceived by social media algorithms. The overarching and, frankly, chilling conclusion to all of this is this: no armed force, no traditional military invasion whatsoever was required to mobilize tens of thousands of people across a heavily fortified border. Only manipulated social media videos targeted directly at youth. It proves that physical border fences mean absolutely nothing when a highly engineered digital campaign can mobilize an entire population overnight. I want to leave you with this final, crucial thought as we wrap up today's explainer. If a fabricated narrative on social media can literally create a 70,000-person physical crisis, trigger international diplomatic breakdowns, and lure 13-year-old children away from their homes, how exactly does society defend itself moving forward? We are looking at a near future where digital manipulation absolutely must be treated with the exact same seriousness reserved for conventional weapons. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.